The Maxine Goodman Levin College of Urban Affairs brings together individuals who are creating the face of urban America. Today we meet Dr. Merissa Piazza, Program Manager for the Center of Economic Development at the Levin College. Hello, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Kristen.
Oh, thanks for coming, Dr. Piazza. I'm going to start, although I just used your name, I'm going to start with, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me on your show today. My name is Merissa Piazza. I'm a program manager in the Center for Economic Development at Cleveland State University.
That sounds the most amazing. So just physically, where are you on campus? Because I'm just going to...
So we are physically located in the Maxine Goodman Levin College of Urban Affairs, and we are a component of the college. So most people and students are very familiar with the fact that Cleveland State's university, so we teach kids things and give them degrees, right? But there's actually a component of where the Levin College does applied research, meaning that we work with all sorts of different stakeholders in the community, whether it's government, nonprofits, or even corporations, to help them answer pertinent research questions that are important to them. And so we, as a research center, we're among several others at the Levin College, help all sorts of different stakeholders answer important questions that relate to Cleveland as a community, Northeast Ohio, the state of Ohio, and their organizations themselves.
So your job is doing research all day, and because I've gotten that as a question from students. They're like, if I could have my dream job, it would just be to sit and do research all day.
Yeah, so I do research all day, but the best part about my job is I get to do research to help the Cleveland community. So we work on, that's what applied research is, right? So applied research is solving day-to-day problems as opposed to basic research, which is, lab rats and like helping solve major scientific breakthroughs, right? Mm-hmm. But applied research really looks and says, what are different things that we are interested in as a community and see how we can help.
All right. Well, that sounds great. So I know at the Levin College, we have a couple different ones. So what does the Center for Economic Development do at Levin?
Right. So the Center for Economic Development focuses on economic development in the urban setting. We work with stakeholders from across the region, Northeast Ohio being a large swath of land, in addition to the state of Ohio. We work with a lot of economic development intermediaries, and that means organizations like the county government, city governments. We work with different organizations that are tasked with economic development objectives, like Team NEO. Team NEO is a business recruitment and a retention policy. So economic development kind of has four main components to it. Business attraction, which is bringing businesses to an area. Recruitment, which is attraction and recruitment is kind of that piece. Retention, meaning keeping businesses that are currently here in a certain geography, meaning Northeast Ohio. Expansion, so helping businesses who are looking to increase employment or technology or hire more people, help them do that. And then the other is kind of growth, which is what we're going to talk about today eventually, is entrepreneurship.
Okay, so with all those different areas, what do you specialize in?
So one of my areas of expertise is entrepreneurship, helping economic development professionals and different nonprofits foster entrepreneurship in whatever way that is. So entrepreneurship is actually really important to economic development, and many people have thought about it as kind of the separate thing. But it's important not only to help your businesses grow and help them gain new businesses in an area. That's important and what most people think about when they think about economic development. But entrepreneurship, on the other hand, is helping people who are starting very small create ideas, create innovation, create new products for a region. And some of those will become big businesses. Some of those will become small businesses in the area. But what it does is it helps the overall health and vitality of an economy to create new ideas, create new innovations. And if those things, even if they fail, happen, it's the synergy that happens within an economy. Think of Silicon Valley, right? Mm-hmm. Silicon Valley is known as the best place to be an entrepreneur because of all of the different resources and people bumping into each other in coffee shops, right? Having that connection with other entrepreneurs, right? So how can we as economic development professionals foster that environment? And that's kind of what I try to help do, and try to help different organizations and research areas think through when they're thinking of strategy or implementation or programs that can help entrepreneurs.
All right. And real quick, because I'm realizing now that we don't know you, how did you get here? Because you're specializing in entrepreneurship. How did you get to this place?
So like many students that have their careers, my career kind of found me instead of me finding it. I'm originally from the Detroit area, and I'm a big proponent of internships and co-ops for this particular reason. I had originally been a double major in political science and Spanish, with every intention of being a lawyer and going to law school. And I was very fortunate to make some networks and intern for the Michigan Supreme Court when I was an undergrad. And it was a great experience. It also made me realize I don't want to be a lawyer. So then...
So many times it happens in the past. You go, this isn't what I want to do.
So that was helpful because I didn't have to put... Not only was I gaining great work experience, but I also realized this wasn't the best career path for me. So what I did realize was that I did want to further my education, and so I got my master's in international affairs. So how does a person with a master's in international affairs end up in Cleveland doing local economic development research? So after that, because of the amount of economics classes I took, I ended up getting a job in Washington, D.C. with the federal government. And when I worked in the federal government, I did a lot of data analytics and statistics. After working for the federal government for several years, I was looking to move to a different locale. DC wasn't a right fit for me, like many people in many places. Sometimes big cities aren't a good fit. I was looking for a place that I could be a part of the community, make a difference. And a friend of mine lived in Cleveland, and she mentioned that I should do what was called the Cleveland Fellowship with the Cleveland Foundation, and it was then called the Cleveland Executive Fellowship. So I moved here to do that, and then after that, I got a job at Cleveland State doing economic development research because of my research background at the federal government.
So see, I tell students all the time, you start in one place and you think you're going to go down one path and you just end up somewhere else.
Yeah, and the key is to do internships, co-ops, anything. So even I did this fellowship, right, when I moved to Cleveland, and that was a mid-career, essentially, internship. I did a variety of different things. I call it my crash course in Cleveland. And I realized when I was working on the fellowship that I really felt like I could play a role in economic development, but more from the research perspective than from a practitioner side of it. So
right.
That's me as a person.
Lovely person. All right. So next one is we're going to talk about a little bit about the center and some of the things that you've published. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, you've recently published a report on co-working. Can you talk to me about this particular research and what your findings are?
Yeah, so I've worked in entrepreneurship for, 15 years, different entrepreneurship research projects. And one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about lately is co-working, right? So
right, I was going to say, what is co-working?
What is co-working? So co-working is what you had normally seen about 10 years ago, people setting up their laptops in a coffee shop and then kind of creating their own network in that coffee shop, because a lot of people now, because of technology advancements, are able to work from home. And so if you work from home, it's great and you get to stay in your pajamas. At the same time, it can be very isolating if that is your full-time gig. So co-working is working in a shared space. Now, what's really exciting is we worked with the Urban Land Institute and a variety of different partners to kind of assess first the economic impact of co-working in Cleveland and to assess kind of what is co-working as a typology. So co-working from its infant phases has been around for 30 years. An organization called Regis actually has always had small offices. So these are people that are like accountants, or you need an office space to conduct your business, but you're not necessarily interested in what your neighbor office person is doing, right? So that's a type of co-working. It's what we call like co-working in tandem and co-working in private, right? So you're physically working next to someone, but you aren't invested in their organization or their business, right? So it might be a private lawyer has one office and another accountant has an office, and you need to share a space in order to see clients. You need a fax machine, you need a water cooler, things like that from an office. But what we are starting to see is there's bigger, depending with taste changes. So more people are working freelance, more people are working from home, but more people are really interested in the interconnection that we talked about with entrepreneurship. They're interested and they want to be invested in other people's businesses. And so what really co-working has now become is a type of programming that people work in tandem, but there's networking events at these different co-working facilities. There's programming that is at these facilities so that people get to know what other people are working on, and they may or may not share in that. They might not be able to help the business. They might not be in the same sphere, but the idea is that no different than a college campus, which is great for furtive ideas. People are walking around and bumping into each other and saying, oh, well, I'm in science and I'm working on this project, and I'm in business, I can help you. That's the point of co-working, is so that people with different experiences but a shared interest can potentially work together.
I was gonna say, it sounds a lot like a college, because when you will have a research project, and you'll see like different faculty from different colleges working together to get to say, well, I don't know much about this history, so we'll bring in some from history, and I don't know a lot about this. So, and then together it's kind of this collaborative.
What's really interesting is, so we set up this typology, and we figured that, okay, so there's some people that are related as they're self-employed or they're freelancing, right? So that's one aspect. And some other people are like small business, and they're small business development. But what's really interesting is you start seeing new market players in this. So companies that are looking to be innovative, they're looking to attract new talent. They know two things. One is making sure that you are an attractive work environment for new, I'm older, so we talk about millennials all the time and millennial tastes, right?
I'm a millennial.
Excellent. So most millennials, from what I've been reading in the literature, is that, and I know from firsthand, is that they're more interested in not having things, but sharing and experiencing things, right? And so how can new businesses and current businesses attract the talent they need and want in order to grow as businesses? So one of the things that we've been seeing is that like IBM and McKinsey and different larger, more trendy type of businesses are adapting co-working facilities for maybe their creative teams, maybe their design staff, maybe their R&D staff, because the idea is that if you make more space for these bumping into interconnections, more creativity will happen. And the hope is that if you and I were working at IBM together and we were talking about something, and I'm a product developer and I'm making the next computer, I'm trying to think of what IBM makes, next computer, and you are a designer for IBM and you make the shell or chairs, or I don't know. So then we have a conversation when we're sitting next to each other and we say, oh, this is really exciting. What if we did this, the next thing, right? So businesses are starting to actually get involved in either contracting out to some of these different companies that are really running the co-working sphere, or they're also kind of revamping their their headquarters to make them look more, quote, new and hip.
So with the new and hip workplaces, though, you're seeing a lot of like walls gone and just like these open spaces. Is that kind of like where you have, in an architectural firm, you might have like, some architects over here, but then you have like the landscape, so they're all together like, hey, can you come help me with this? And so it's more like that, or are you talking?
Yes and no. So what's really interesting is that the biggest segment of that's growing in the co-working market is private office space. Mm-hmm. So here's a scenario on why co-working is kind of the new thing. Say we own a business, right? And we own what are we gonna make?
So we're gonna make derby hats.
Okay, so we make hats, right? Mm-hmm. So we start online platform, we make the hats in our basement, and then we realize, oh, you know what, we really need to meet with clients, so we're going to move into a co-working space, right? So you can look around you in this little podcasting studio, and you can see this is what, like 100 square feet? Okay, so this is great. This is great for us. We're going to pay $500 a month. We get a shared phone. We get some bagels in the morning. We get maybe a tech support every once in a while, and we're not responsible for any of the maintenance or anything, right? Well, then our business is doing really well online. So what do we want to do? We want to hire a couple people, right? Well, instead of taking that risk of going out and signing a 2-year lease on an office building, I email my co-working manager of the facility and I say, hey, you know what, I'm going to hire on 2 more people. Can I get another office next door? Sure, no problem. Your bill just went up by another $1,000. So it makes, not only is the space itself like physically flexible, but it makes businesses more flexible for hiring. So maybe we have a surge of hats during derby season. Well, we need to hire 4 people for that, right? Well, then for 3 months, we're going to take on additional offices. Mm-hmm. And then the next 2 months, we're just not going to be built. So this is what people like. And we're starting to hypothesize that as some of these bigger names get in the market, you're going to see more of businesses not interested in leasing spaces or any sort of management of properties, right? And that's where kind of these big businesses get involved, where they're like, their biggest liability is the building they own. That's the big thing that's depreciating on them. So if they can push that off their books onto somebody else, that seems like a win for them. So it's really interesting. So if you can move this office rent and all this stuff off of your, quote, books, as we call it, like your accounting, we found that there is an extremely high correlation between the amount of office rent that you are charged as an individual and whether or not there is a huge supply of co-working spaces. Right? So it makes complete economic sense. So if it's more expensive for you to sign a 2-year lease, giving you the flexibility of moving into a co-working space as a business is good for your bottom line. So places like San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York, Boston, Austin, they have very high commercial rents. And so they have a high proportion of co-working spaces. So that leaves us to, well, what about Cleveland?
What about Cleveland?
So, interesting. So Cleveland's farther on that. So if New York and D.C. and San Francisco are all up at the top end of high co-working, expensive places, Cleveland's more towards low co-working, low expensive rents, right? So commercial rents in Cleveland aren't very expensive in comparison to the national average. And there is co-working happening. So there's some new different places that have launched co-working. You may have heard about them. There's the beauty shop that launched. There's a couple different nonprofit ones. And there's more interest nationally in the Cleveland market than other places.
Is it the beauty? Is it the one? There's one in like Lakewood where it's like, would this be co-working? Because there's a one in Lakewood that I go to because my hair person didn't go back to her salon. She went instead to this where she literally just has her room with like a chair and a and a sink, and it's just her.
That would be technically, that is what we are calling like the working in tandem, right? Mm-hmm. Technically that is co-working, but that's more shared office space.
Right.
Because you're not interested. We're looking for when we say co-working, our definition is people that are specifically looking for programming that helps create that buzz, that momentum. So examples in the Cleveland area of what we are calling like full-on co-working would be the Beauty Shop, which is in the city of Cleveland. It just moved on the near west side. Cleveland Collabs, Launch House, Limelight, Regis that we had talked about, Spaces & Co., Start Mart, Tech Hub Hudson. The Dealership is a new one in Shaker Heights. And so these are specifically places that would have programming like once a night. The big one in New York City for women is called The Wing, right? You may have heard a lot about this, right? So they have specific programming. It's a women-only space. They have programming so that women can empower other women. And so, you have maybe a networking night. You have a pizza night. You have a coding night. We're going to create a new app night, right? So the co-working space not only manages the building and keeps the lights on, but they also specifically create programming to foster this dynamic community. So we found that what's interesting, as we talked about earlier about like different types of what you can and can't do at co-working spaces. So there's kind of three different things. One is what they call a hot desk. So if you and I were just starting our, hat business and we don't want to spend a lot of money, but at the same time, we are interested in starting it officially. We need to make calls and we need to not make them with our dogs barking in the background, right? So we're going to have a hot desk. What does that mean? Well, you have your laptop, your own personal laptop, and you plug it in, and then, you don't have a dedicated office space. You come and go as you please. It's open 24 hours. You do this. And the nice part about this is that it's like $100, $150 a month, right? So if you need a quiet place to study, or you need a place to work, or you're working part-time from home, these are what we would really call nascent entrepreneurs, right? A lot of people also use these as if they are, if they're traveling a lot, right? So if you travel a lot, working from your hotel room can be pretty grim. So going to a place that is a little more lively. The second one is be a dedicated desk, right? So exactly what you were talking about earlier, flat, open, kind of bullpen-like, office space. And then what we call the growing market, which is really just closed door office spaces.
So for entrepreneurs, this is going to be big, especially, I'm going to say, maybe even for millennials, because the idea of them starting their own business and wanting to do their own business is huge. And they don't now it's not like, well, I have to find the capital for the big building and a warehouse and all this other stuff. If I just want to work, just me and my friend and a couple other people, we can just buy this little space and it'll be just our little workspace.
Absolutely. And so what's nice is it scales down the risk, right? So you can look way more professional than you may be. You can still work in your pajama pants, I promise everybody. But it makes it way more professional to your external stakeholders than you probably would have been otherwise. In addition, a lot of these different places work with places like CSU. They work with places that also have interns. So if you're interested in the co-working business, or you're interested in working for a startup, you can call that co-working space. You can call CSU and you can say, I want to work for a startup. Northeast Ohio actually has a very furtive startup environment, and a lot of this is funded by the Burton D. Morgan Foundation. So they host during the summer, they have a variety of interns that can be placed in startups. And so you kind of learn the startup culture. And so then if we're starting our hat business and we need an intern for the summer, then we can afford one, right? We have a place to house them. We have networks to find the right person. So it makes what can be very difficult startup phase for an entrepreneur a little smoother.
I wonder how this would work with, like, looking at everyone who does like YouTube videos and stuff like that, and how they have to get like a home studio if they could do like this co-working and have a studio always set up in a dedicated studio space to do their YouTube videos and stuff like that.
It's very interesting you mentioned that, because I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, and it talks about there is a new place in LA that is a shared housing. This is not anything, but it's a shared housing facility, and they have, so you have a very small bedroom that you share with somebody else, and everything else is common to the whole entire group. And one of it was they had like a podcasting studio for artists as a part of the shared housing. So I think this is the new trend. I think one of the things that's very interesting is that WeWork, which is the national player in co-working, national actually and international player in co-working, has been having a difficult time as of late. They've had a lot of success gaining investors into their initial brand, but due to a bunch of hiccups with their CEO and kind of the corporate culture that they have as a company, you're seeing a little bit of pushback right now on whether or not that can happen nationwide. Or internationally, right? So they're launching their IPO, which is initial public offering to go public on the stock market, and they've had a lot of hiccups and they haven't been able to launch that. So does that make co-working less valuable? No. Does it mean that there might not be one dominant player in the market? Maybe. But for Cleveland, when we talk about entrepreneurship, a lot of people, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I find an entrepreneur story very interesting. And I think a lot of Clevelanders are entrepreneurial as people, right? So having the resiliency to overcome tragedy and loss. If anybody's a Browns fan, you're a resilient person, right?
I think Cleveland being a legacy city, you're a resilient person.
That too, as well, right? So overcoming a lot of the manufacturing losses that we've had, and overcoming and trying to find a new job, and constantly reinventing yourself as a city makes us very resilient. So I know a lot of people who make things out of their basement, or they're not ready to make that big step yet, right? So having co-working maybe can, even if they're not ready to make the big step and quit their full-time job yet, they could work there on the weekends, or they can do things at a lower cost. So it's an exciting new kind of development to the entrepreneurship landscape.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think about it, I think, we should do the hat and be, I think what would be interesting is if you and I became entrepreneurs and had the entrepreneurship, and we'll just do that, right?
I have many ideas.
Well, let's do the hat. You guys, if you're listening, think about, whether or not we should do a hat business.
Is this like going to be the podcast where people call in and ask whether or not you should or shouldn't do things?
I wish, people should just think about calling in, and I'll just, no. But no, so this is, co-working is really interesting. It's a new thing. Go ahead. So
what's really exciting about all of this in this new sphere, whether it's co-working or it's entrepreneurship, it's really being embraced across the country. Entrepreneurship as a component of economic development is being embraced. I think if we were to have this conversation 10 years ago, you'd have been like, so tell me what the big new company we're going to land in Cleveland's going to be, right?
Right, because we were looking at, were we up for Amazon? No.
So we weren't part of the top tier packets. So the thing is that I think that attraction's a component. Mm-hmm. I think retention's a huge component. I think expansion's a component, right? But making sure that not only are you working from the top down with large and existing businesses, but trying to encourage people to become entrepreneurs is not only good for the economy, but it's also good for people, right? So, having the wherewithal to overcome and be resilient as a person is a lot of what you see in entrepreneurs, and it's also what you see in successful people. So whether or not you are interested in actually starting a business, or maybe you're going to start a nonprofit, or maybe you're going to do a social enterprise, right? So having that spirit to overcome is just as important as individuals as it is for our economy.
When I look around Cleveland, I see a lot of startups. Like when we look at, especially like Ohio City, you have all sorts of startups. And so I think it's the spirit of Cleveland to be entrepreneurial, and it's nice to have the larger companies.
It is now. That's so I've written a lot on it as it relates to like the culture change in Cleveland, right? So the culture change, if 15, 20 years ago, there weren't many startups, right? So that's why a lot of public effort. So people ask, why is the government involved in entrepreneurship? Why are there these nonprofits? Well, because for a while there weren't entrepreneurs, right? And so we had, as citizens, we needed to say, we need to create our own. So in order to do that and overcome what we, in economics terms, say a market failure. So all these big businesses went out of business. So the market failure is, well, we don't have any entrepreneurs. Nobody knew how to be an entrepreneur. No bankers knew how to do entrepreneurial lending. Attorneys didn't know how to do startup contracts, right? So it's not just people, it's the support mechanisms that help the people become champions, if you will, of these. Now, mind you, 20 years ago, people didn't have email addresses. And so the information barriers that happened are a lot less. Like you can Google how to be a startup and get on a million different platforms right now. And you can write your business plan in a night. So, well, not a night, but I mean, you can take an online course on how to write a business plan for free from Coursera, right? And rock and roll. So all of this coming together is important.
Any final thoughts?
So in relation to what we have studied as it relates to co-working, we estimate that roughly there is a market for co-working in the Cleveland metro area. We say something like we have over 20,000 people could be using co-working spaces. So these are people that are self-employed or freelancers, they're small businesses or entrepreneurs, they could be corporate employees that you might not be interested in having in some sort of siloed place all the way out in wherever, and then other people, business travelers, teleworkers. And then we also conducted an economic impact on co-working, either creating a co-working facility. And so there is significant economic impact as it relates to creating and operating co-working facilities. So the value proposition of having co-working is not only good for entrepreneurial development, it's also good for business development, it's also good for construction development and maintaining a healthy economy. So all of the information that we've just talked about today is available on our website, which is at www.
I was saying I'm going to link it below.
levin.urban.csuohio.edu /CED, which stands for the Center for Economic Development. All of our publications are most of our publications are available online for free and download to the public. We have everything. I have a variety of things on entrepreneurship. We have a variety of things on economic impacts of really interesting organizations in town, if you're interested. We also have a variety of industry studies as it relates to what is growing in Cleveland, what isn't growing in Cleveland. So feel free to check our webpage out and check our publications out. They're all free, and you're all welcome to use them. It's going to be
it public domain?
It's on CSU's website, and so you just go and download them and read to your heart's content.
By Dr. Merissa Piazza. And then who else is in your center?
So I am one of four. We have my director. Her name is Dr. Irina Lendl. We also have Dr. Ira Demko, who is a research associate. And we have Matt Ellerbrock, who is a research assistant. The nice part about this is that we, on average, hire 6 to 8 students to help us out throughout the year during the semester and summers and weekends. And so this allows us to really help students understand economic development, and we like to brag that we have a 100% placement rate of our students within, on average, 3 to 6 months. And they're not working at places they don't want to work at. They want to work at places. So we have students who work for the city, they work for the county governments, a couple work for different transportation organizations in town, and we have a couple people working in the real estate markets. So they take their skills and they go off and, I like to say, do great things.
They do. They learn to change the world.
They do.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Piazza, for joining us today. It's been absolutely, I'm excited to look into more in co-working and see how this is going to work in the Cleveland area, but I'm also really excited just as like more entrepreneurs are coming to Cleveland and see how it works.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Go ahead and share this with all your friends and like and subscribe to all of our social media, which is going to be linked down below if you're on YouTube, if you're on any of our other mediums and listen to this as an actual podcast. Just check out our website. All the links are on there. And thanks again. And until next time.